hearts. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion, and we are in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Daze with Jordan the Lion, you all, and the Joster. It begins right now. Hold on to your seat. We're going through a bridge. I told you he's here and he's here. Let's go see Pistol Pete, Ja. Here we are at Rest Haven Cemetery. Alright, it looks like he's straight back. Sorry about the windshield. I cleaned it last night before we started driving, and I'm driving for about 20 minutes today. It's already covered in bugs. There's the fleur-de-lis. Oh, hello. So right over here, if you look for the big hands behind the mausoleum, right over here, the very front row is Pete Maravich. Some say the greatest, one of the greatest basketball players to ever play as far as technical ability, what he could do with the basketball, his ball handling, his scoring, his defense. He was amazing, and he really didn't have much of a choice from the time he was a little kid. His dad was a great basketball player, had been a pro player, and then made his living as a coach for high school and eventually college. So he basically instilled in Pete when he was a little boy, hey, if you want to be the greatest of all time, if you want to win championships, if you want to be a millionaire, listen to me and I'll guide you there. And that's kind of what ended up happening. When you hear that old classic story of like the kid that can't leave a basketball, sleeps with his basketball, everywhere he goes he's dribbling the basketball, doesn't do his homework, dreams of just being the greatest of all time, that was Pete Maravich, and that literally is what happened. He would not do any, his teachers would say he would do his homework or he'd do work in class, but once he left the class he would literally just not do anything. And then when they'd ask him about it, he'd say, I'm playing basketball all the time. When do I have time to do homework? And they brought his dad in, who was also a coach, of course, and who wanted him to be the greatest of all time. And his dad said, I think he's wasting his time doing this schoolwork because he's going to make more money being a basketball player than you'll ever make being a teacher. So that's kind of what he was dealing with at home. And he was so good that at the age of 11 or 12 years old, he was already on the varsity high school team. So he was playing with 17, 18-year-olds when he was just 11 years old in junior high. So Pete continued to work on this with his father's approval and became a star high school player, of course. Then when he was ready to go to college, basically what had happened, his father had coached for Clemson and NC State, and Pete's grades were so bad that he was having trouble, even though he was good enough technically for a scholarship for basketball. Nobody would give him one because his SAT scores were so bad. So he basically, his father, Press, and you'll notice that Pete's middle name is Press, his father put out basically feelers at colleges and said, hey, it's package deal. If you want the future greatest basketball player of all time and you want me as the coach, that's what, you know, you got to offer him a scholarship. So LSU here in Baton Rouge, they offered Press the job. And when Press told Pete that he was going to go to LSU, Pete said, I didn't even know anything about LSU's basketball program. I really had never heard anything, and told my dad, I'm not playing there. There's no way I'm playing there. And Press said, oh yeah, you are, or don't come home. And Pete said, well, if you want me to play there, you're gonna have to give me a car. So eventually Press had 2 car payments and a house payment that he was paying to get Pete to play on his team in college. Now, honestly, that was probably a really wise decision, because Pete ended up being the greatest, or the most scoring player in NCAA history. He could do everything on the basketball court and prided himself in not only being a good basketball player, but putting on a show. So he was once described as, if you took all of the Harlem Globetrotters, put them all together, that's what Pete Maravich was. He would spend hours just walking around dribbling in circles and behind his back and doing things. So when he got on the court, people wanted to come to the games, and they would, even in his freshman season, the freshman games would have doors just completely packed and people overflowing, and then when the varsity games would happen, there'd be like a couple hundred people. So Pete ended up setting the scoring record for NCAA, like I said. His first 2 seasons, he averaged 44 points a game, and there just wasn't really anything on the court he couldn't do. So when he went to the pros, the only issue was that everybody in Baton Rouge at LSU knew that Pete loved to drink, and he would go out and drink himself to the point where he wouldn't even know how he got home. So that was a little bit of an issue that everyone knew about, but the Atlanta Hawks offered Pete quite a big contract, and he ended up signing and debuting with the Hawks. The problem was the Atlanta Hawks were primarily an African-American starting team, and when Pete came in, because of how flashy he was and how popular he was in college and his scoring and everything, he was actually given $1 million for his first season, and that was quadruple what a lot of the other players are making. And when the other players complained about it, they were told, well, we don't have the money to pay you, or you're just not as good as him. And so even though the players liked Pete off the court, on the court, they'd really kind of take it out on him. A lot of the times they didn't want to give him the ball because they didn't want him to do anything on the court, or they just kind of held what the owner said against Pete. And Pete eventually would, you know, basically also have the same problems in Atlanta, where he would be a great scorer, great player, would do things you'd never seen, but he was also a drinker, and then eventually was traded to the New Orleans Jazz, which was actually probably a good move because it brought him back to New Orleans, brought him back to Louisiana. Now, Pete was playing really well there, and did so until he hurt himself. In the middle of a game, he went to make a pass, and when he stepped down, you could hear a crack, it was said, in the arena, and he ended up not playing for a year. And when he came back, he really wasn't the same player. And then with all the other kind of issues that he was known for off the court, he was basically dropped by the Jazz before they moved out to Utah. And then the Celtics took him on for a little while, and he had a great season with them, but then he just realized that he wasn't enjoying it as much, and he wasn't the player he used to be. So after just playing for like 10 years or a decade, he decided that he was going to retire, and did retire. And then when he retired, he said he basically didn't leave his home for a year, and just kind of drank and thought, and didn't play any basketball or anything. And then one night in his sleep, he was awoken by what he thought was the voice of God, and God told him how to change his life. And Pete completely changed his life, dedicated his life to God, and even started playing basketball again, and started coaching Christian clinics in Clearwater. He and his father got along great, but really only because of basketball. There was really no depth to the relationship beyond that. And even Pete's mother, she was agoraphobic, so she really didn't like to leave the house. And because of how close Pete and his father were, she kind of felt left out, and eventually developed a bit of a drinking problem. She never went to hardly any of the games that Press coached, never really went to any of Pete's games that he played. And eventually she ended up taking her own life. Now, when Pete found God, he went and made amends with his father, basically just went to his father, who was getting older, and told him how he had changed his life, and got Press into the religion as well. And they really had, for like the last years of Press's life, a really good relationship outside of basketball. And Press died in 1987, and 6 months later, Pete actually followed him out of the blue. He was in Pasadena. He was going to speak about his religion and everything, and was playing a pickup game. And I actually went and vlogged that place where it all happened and told that story, but we got to see that court, and while he was playing, he actually fell to the ground and passed away there. So in the end, the reason that Pistol Pete passed away is that he only had one coronary artery. Most people are born with two, and he didn't know that he only had one. So he ended up passing away at the age of 40 years old, left behind a wife and 2 sons. And I want to go over to the arena because they've recently renamed, or I know at least the name of the arena is now after Pistol Pete, and there's a statue there, and I just want to go see some of that. I used to always hear my grandpa, since he was a big fan of Larry Bird, always talk about Bob Cousy and Pistol Pete Maravich. Almost every great scorer in the NBA ever pretty much mentions how good Pistol Pete was. I'm kind of surprised Pete Maravich doesn't have something like that at his grave. There's a big LSU flag right there. Shaq also went to LSU. We've made it to LSU campus. Here we are, Pete Maravich Assembly Center. Now, I don't know why Pete is surrounded in fencing, but he is. And that's him. Floppy-haired Pete Maravich. LSU's number 23. Very cool. What an honor. Now it says, member of the Basketball Hall of Fame, 1987, member of the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, 2006, NBA's 50th anniversary all-time team, member of LSU's All-Century Team, 2009, number 23, retired by LSU, number 44, retired by the Atlanta Hawks, and number 7, retired by the Utah Jazz and New Orleans Pelicans. And then down here at the foot of it, it's showing him doing some of his classic between the legs ball handling, dribbling, and it says NCAA all-time scoring leader with 3,667 points, averaged NCAA record 44.2 points during his college career. He was NCAA All-American 1968, 69, and 70, National College Player of the Year 69 and 70, and SEC Player of the Year 1968, 69, and 70. And then look, they have him doing like a behind the back pass. Now on this other side of the statue it says 10-year NBA career, making All-Star team 5 times, drafted number 3 overall by the Atlanta Hawks in 1970, led the NBA in scoring with 31.1 points a game in 1976 and 77, 4-time member of the All-NBA team and averaged 24.2 points during his NBA career. And then since he's here and such an amazing player when he was here, Shaquille O'Neal. The word domination when he played, like he was beyond dominant. LSU did not do great in the NCAA when he was there, but he as a player was absolutely incredible. You can see they've got a picture of him on the side with all of his accolades. And a picture of him playing at LSU also. And then they have another statue down here. Looks like they have room for one more right here. This is for NBA great Bob Pettit. LSU number 50. Looks like he also played for the Atlanta Hawks. Or actually the Milwaukee Hawks. Drafted in 1954. Also a Hall of Famer. 1971, and joined the College Hall of Fame in 2006. Kind of wondering if they have any of Pete's memorabilia or awards or anything on display inside. I'm gonna see if we can get inside. Can you imagine being a star athlete in college and your dad being the coach? and you and your dad constantly getting into arguments. It looks like they're working on the Huey P. Long Swimming Center. They do have some memorabilia and some history inside, but we can't really get in. I was just hoping to see maybe the court. Let's see if we can get into Heroes Hall up here. Well, my friends, we're gonna call it a day from Baton Rouge. Thank you all for watching. Please hit that like button, please subscribe, and please ring the bell for notifications. Have a great night, and goodbye.